So, I'm doing a series of lectures on Plato, using the Republic of Plato translated by Alan Bloom. Plato is perhaps one of the greatest, not the greatest, philosophers of the Western world. It has been said that everything afterwards is something of a footnote to Plato. Certainly it seems that Plato has set the tone for how Western culture thinks about itself and how Western culture addresses ideas and visions of the world. In the Republic, Plato addresses perhaps some of the greatest issues in his philosophical career. I'm going to address the Republic, not so much as a philosophical work, but as a theological or historical work, but rather addressing it as a mythical work. What Plato has to say about mythology and story making, I think, is very important to how we think of ourselves as Westerners and as human beings. To begin with, the story opens with famous three words of Socrates, the protagonist. Like most of the dialogues, this is set up as a single character speaking, and we have Socrates opening the dialogue with the words, "I went down to the Piraeus yesterday with Glaucon, son of Ariston, to pray to the goddess, and at the same time I wanted to observe how they would put on the festival, since they were now holding it for the first time." Now there's a lot to notice in this opening of the text. First off, the text begins as a dialogue, but it has a single speaker. And unlike other dialogues, there is no interaction between characters, essentially. It is all in the recounting of the event of a dinner party in the Piraeus by one character, by Socrates himself. So to some extent, the whole work is like a monologue rather than a dialogue. It is Socrates himself speaking to the world at large. But that being the case, you do have exchange between various characters, between Socrates and his interlocutors, the various men of Athens that he is befriended. In this opening, there's a great deal to plumb in terms of meaning on a literary scale. Notice first that the setting of the Republic is in the Piraeus of Athens. Now why is this significant? There are a number of things to note about the Piraeus. First off, the meaning of the word is important. Names in Plato always mean something. All the names of the characters mean something. All the names of places are chosen intentionally. Plato is in total master of his medium, and so he is able to choose words and images, ideas, as he sees fit. And there's really nothing in the work which is not consciously chosen by Plato. The names all mean something, and they have some bearing on what the text is trying to show us. Piraeus, literally, means the entrance over the chasm. And traditionally, Piraeus was not just a port city, but also a large salt mine. And there are numerous caverns beneath the city as well. So historically, it's a port city and a salt mine. Now, because of its nature as a city that saw a great deal of commerce, it was a city of multifarious cultures. It's a polyglot in terms of its language. It had numerous religions, numerous types of people. It was really quite the grab bag of variety and democracy. So Piraeus is a port city. It has a multitude of variation. Has a variation of different cultures and languages, religions. But also note that as a port city, well, even then, as today, sailors getting off of the ships would do what sailors like to do best. And it's not play Parcheesi. They would gamble, and they would seek women of ill repute, and they would go to red light districts. And where were those red light districts? Most of them were in the Piraeus. Piraeus was itself a merchant-driven city. It was primarily a mercantile class of residents, independently wealthy, nouveau riche, and it also was a city that was something of a dangerous area. Red light district, dangerous and vice in the area. Much like a lot of port cities today. It stank. It was cramped. So the city itself not only had various cultures, but it also had a great deal of crime. It was cramped. It had a red light district, ill repute. It was a mercantile city primarily, rather than, say, old wealth. As a port city, it also smelled. There was a stink. Not the most pleasant place to live, but a very profitable place to live. So, on one hand, it's the entrance over the chasm is the name. On the other hand, it is a place which has variation of cultures. On the third hand, it is a place which has a specific type of character. Crime, darkness, cramp, things like that. So, given these elements here, we begin to build a sense of what the setting actually is like for the dialogue. Additionally, Piraeus is geographically lower than the Acropolis. If we look at what the Acropolis is like, with its outcropping of volcanic rock and down to the water, this area up here, the Acropolis, the high city, notice, high acro and city polis, the high city would have had on it the Parthenon and the various temples to the gods, and was a fortress city, basically. A very ancient fortress, even from prehistoric times. It was this volcanic leftover and almost impregnable. So the Athenians, the residents of the area, have been using it as a fortress for many years. In Socrates' time, this city on top of the hill had been built up by the money that had been acquired by Athens as tribute from its various constituents. So that city was marble. You can imagine it was marble, trimmed with gold, painted up statuary. It would have shone from a distance, much like what the pyramids used to do. Pyramids themselves were encased in marble with a large gold pyramid on top, about maybe that high. And the pyramid would have been brilliant in the surrounding desert, shown for miles around, much like what the Acropolis was. Athenians didn't build pyramids, but the Acropolis was itself a shining city on the hill. Consequently, Acropolis is very much like heaven, very much like Olympus for the Greeks. And it was the place from which laws descended to the rest of the city. The Acropolis was not just the place of holy worship, it was also the place of state worship, if we call it that, because state and religion were more or less one and the same in Athenian times.